This video is about using the inverter on aha moments. The inverter is located in the cruise quarters on the starboard side, and the inverter can handle 4,000 watts, but there's only a 300 amp hour battery bank, which only gives you 150 usable amp hours. And that is at 24 volts. So when you multiply that by 6, it does not give you a whole lot of amperage. So you must always make sure that you minimize the amount of AC loads on the inverter. To start with, you want to make sure that the 24 volt battery charger is off, because it doesn't do any good for you to charge the batteries with battery power, along with the 12 volt. The other big energy sink for a AC system is the water heater. Okay, I have left the ACs, the air conditioners, on, but I have turned them off. You must either turn them off or here or at the breakers or at the AC, because if not, I turned one on yesterday, it drew about 50 amps. That means that you would run your batteries down in about an hour and a half to 50% capacity, which is the lowest you should ever use them to, and that will fry your batteries. Everything else can stay on, just be careful what you use. Don't use the microwave at the same time as you're, say, using dishwasher, no. Don't even use that. Or the barbecue, that would be a big one. Don't even use the barbecue when you're on AC power. Microwave, the crew freezers, the lamps, things like that, the rope lighting, they use very little power. That's all fine. Now we'll go down to the transfer switch. Briefly, before we do the transfer switch, we're going to go into the engine room and actually turn the power on to the inverter. I think this switch is best off. It can be left on, but this is where the switch for the inverter gets its battery power. If it's on, the inverter will use a little bit of battery power when it doesn't need to. So it's best that this is off. But to transfer to the inverter power, you need to turn this on. So you just flip that like that, and that gives the 24 volts to the inverter. In order not to cycle any AC loads, compressors like that too fast, it is best to turn them off here at shore power to start with. This is the switch by the shore power control, and it is this will turn the AC loads off and disconnect from shore power. It is better if you're on the generator to turn it to off as well. You don't want to stop and immediately restart things like refrigerator compressors and things like that. They don't like to be stopped and started. They get surge problems. So here's the inverter in the cruise quarters. This is the AC breaker. That allows the AC output from the inverter to flow to that transfer switch. Here is the temporary home of the control. This control later will be mounted in the breaker panel where we were just at. However, turning the inverter on and off, you need to make sure, if you transfer to the inverter, that all those AC loads are off. So anyway, the inverter is on. We turn this on, and now the inverter is inverting and creating AC power. In order to allow that to flow over to the rotary transfer switch we were just at, we flip this up. No, this can be left on again. However, if there's ever a short up there at the shore power, that current then can flow into the inverter, possibly harming the inverter. Lightning strikes, things like that. It's best just to leave these switches off, as the inverter, using inverter power kind of is a specialized moment. So we will now go and turn the rotary switch upstairs to inverter from off, where we just put it, to allow the power to flow into the boat. So we now flip this to inverter, and the boat is currently being powered off of the batteries. So we see here that the boat is being powered by the inverter. It's using 10 amps at 25 volts. This is kind of what we call the rest load. In other words, if you're not using any big appliances on the boat, it's always going to draw something from lights, this, that, everything else. The refrigerators, it'll fluctuate. A refrigerator turns on, it draws 5-6 amps more. Okay? depending on what you start up. If you turn an AC on, and I can turn on the crew AC real quick. Suddenly you'll see it pops up to 60 amps. That means that it was still drawing the 6 amps and now it's drawing 50 more. And if you notice, the battery voltage just dropped. You can run the AC, but again at 50 amps you're going to run those batteries down in an hour and a half or so, maybe 2 hours. So best not to do it. However, you do have water, the microwave, the refrigerators will keep working overnight, so you won't have a problem with that. Let me turn that AC off real quick. So you can see us now back to the 8 amps or so. You know, the boat can run this for 10 hours, 15 hours, no problem. So the generator does not need to be run all the time. To shut it all down, probably the best thing to do is go ahead and shut the inverter off. And I'm going to flip this breaker off. Also, if you notice, there's a lot of other switches here. You can use this to switch to shore power. There's an inlet in here. The shore power can come in. This can then become your battery charger. It can be a backup battery charger. You have an automatic generator start. This will automatically start your generator. All kinds of fun things. Meters, setup, and tech. So there's more options here. Read the manual. I can't explain it all in video. Now, since we happen to be at shore, I am going to flip this back to shore power. I did pause everything. When I shut the inverter off, it was the equivalent of this being off because the inverter was putting in no power. Now, if we were on generator power, you would shut the generator down, you would flip this to inverter, and the generator transfer switch to shore, and then you would simply be running off the inverter. It's whatever flows out of this switch into the boat, then flows to that switch for the generator. So it's primary coming in here, your generator switch is secondary, but it doesn't matter. Once you switch over to the generator, that's off. Whether that comes from the inverter or shore power, doesn't matter. Remember, it's best to flip this battery switch to off, and the inverter should be shut down. You can transfer this switch under load. It's not good for it. It arcs a little bit inside, but I got a better switch that is away from the wall, so it's also ignition protected and everything else. So it's very safe, but don't use it when the inverter is on, or it will arc inside and it will eventually ruin it. And don't forget to come back down here, turn your battery chargers back on, 12 volt, 24 volt, your hot water heater if you want that, and that's it. And you can just turn the ACs back on at the ACs, since we didn't do the switches here. Happy camping.